I work as a home inspector in Atlanta, Georgia. Over the years, I've completed well over 1,000 home and building inspections. As a home inspector, I see houses of all kinds. Old, new, pristine, falling apart, and even homes that haven't been built yet. If it's a home, chances are I've inspected something like it. Most of my work is in Atlanta and the surrounding metro area. The oldest house in Atlanta itself is the Joseph Willis House, built in the 1840s, and it still stands at its original location today. The oldest structure I've personally inspected was an old church built sometime in the late 1800s, but the house this story is about was built in the early 1900s. If you're not familiar with crawl spaces beneath houses, consider yourself lucky. A crawl space is a small area underneath a house, usually just dirt, used for things like HVAC systems, water heaters, plumbing, or storage. Depending on how well the homeowner maintains it, the dirt floor might be covered in plastic and relatively clean. But most crawl spaces are the opposite. Spiderwebs everywhere, bugs crawling around, standing pools of water, the wooden flooring above you often coated in mold. The house I was inspecting that day had been sitting vacant for quite a while. The crawl space was filled with discarded trash and an extremely old furnace or boiler, depending on where you're from. To make matters worse, this crawl space was extremely low. I'm a pretty big guy, and moving around down there was difficult. Some crawl spaces are tall enough to stand in, but most require you to crawl the entire time. Before I went under the house, my clients asked me to check a few specific things in the crawl space. Once they were finished, I squeezed myself through the small entrance. I had my headlamp on, a breathing mask, and what I call my crawl space suit, which is basically just a mechanic's suit. About 6 minutes into crawling around, taking photos, avoiding puddles, and checking the foundation, my headlamp suddenly went out. One of my biggest fears while crawling under the house is the idea of the structure shifting and trapping me underneath. So when the light went out, it was pitch black. In my mind, I was already imagining the house collapsing down on top of me. I tried turning the light back on several times. The stupid thing had a habit of dying at the worst possible moments. After a moment of fiddling with my headlamp, the light finally flickered back on. And right in front of me, illuminated by the beam, was a stone well. I could have sworn it hadn't been there before. This was a small house, and the size of the crawl space usually reflects the size of the house itself. From where I had been crawling, I could practically see the entire space. It made no sense that I would have missed something like that. Still, curiosity got the better of me. Before I could even take a picture, I heard something, a voice. Help me. The voice sounded distant, tired, almost ghostly. At first I thought I was imagining things, then I heard it again. Help me, I'm in the well, please. My heart started pounding. I quickly crawled towards the well. The area around it had just enough clearance for me to kneel. I leaned over the edge, bracing my hands against the cold, damp stone. My headlamp shined down into the well. It was about 15 feet deep. At the bottom was only about a foot of water, and sitting there was a boy. He had dark hair and was wearing what looked like old-fashioned pajamas. Clutched in his arms was a soaked stuffed animal. I couldn't even tell what kind of animal it used to be. It was too deteriorated. "How'd you get down there?" I asked. The boy just looked up at me and said again, "Help me, please." I yelled that I'd be right back. Without thinking, I tossed my headlamp down towards him and switched to using the flashlight on my inspection phone. Then I turned and started crawling out of the crawl space as fast as I could. When I finally squeezed back outside, the client saw me and chuckled at how filthy I looked. They asked how things looked under the house. I shouted for them to call 911. There's a boy trapped in a well under the house. They stared at me in complete confusion. They had no idea there was a well under the house. Still, they started dialing. I ran to my truck and grabbed the rope I always keep in there and an extra headlamp and ran back to the crawl space entrance. Then I dove back inside. I crawled as fast as I could, but the floor jolts kept slamming into my back. I could hear sirens in the distance, hopefully coming for us. But as I crawled, the faster I moved, the more dust and dirt I kicked up into the crawl space. Soon I couldn't see anything, not even a foot in front of me. I couldn't even tell where the well was anymore. I called out into the darkness, "Hey, where are you? Hello?" Suddenly a bright light pierced through the dust. Someone shouted, "Fire department coming in." 3 firefighters crawled towards me carrying rescue equipment. They asked where the boy was, and I told them he was in the well. Now there were 4 of us under the house, and the dust only got worse. Eventually we all slowed down and waited for the dirt in the air to settle. And once it finally cleared enough for us to see, we started looking for the well. But there wasn't one. Not anywhere. We could see the entire crawl space clearly. There was no well, no opening in the ground, no place big enough to kneel, nothing. I was completely stunned. The 4 of us searched the crawl space thoroughly before crawling back out. There was absolutely nothing in there. I was adamant about what I saw. The well, the boy, the cold stone beneath my hands. The police eventually told me that before calling 911, I needed to be absolutely certain about what I was reporting. That was the first and only paranormal experience I've ever had. Now I finally understand what people mean when they describe something was truly eerie. Ever since that day, whenever I enter a house for an inspection, I quietly apologize to anything that might be there for invading its space. I tell it I'll be leaving shortly. I've never seen anything like that again, and I hope that whoever or whatever was sitting at the bottom of that well eventually found peace. Because after I threw my headlamp down to him, I never found it again. This happened last year in Virginia, and it's the reason I'll never backpack alone again. At the time I was taking summer classes, and we ended up getting a 3-day weekend in June. I figured it would be the perfect opportunity to explore some of Virginia's wilderness. After doing a quick search online, I found a nice state park with access to a section of the Appalachian Trail. The trail looked beautiful in the photos. Lots of forests, mountain views, and plenty of spots to camp. Before leaving, I told my roommate and my family where I was going just in case. When I got close to the park, I passed a small outdoor shop where hikers on the Appalachian Trail usually stop for supplies. I figured it wouldn't hurt to grab a map of the area in case I got lost. Inside the shop, I started chatting with the owner. When I mentioned the trail I planned on hiking, he told me about another path that wasn't well known. According to him, it led to a waterfall and a swimming hole that most hikers never saw. Naturally, that caught my interest. He pointed the location out on the map, though it technically sat just outside the official park boundaries. He assured me it was still worth checking out. I paid for the map, thanked him, and texted my roommate and my parents about the change of plans before setting off. The waterfall was meant to be a side trip during my hike. My plan was to spend 3 days and 2 nights out there. The first part of the hike followed the main trail, and it was pretty crowded. I passed plenty of other hikers, some of whom were fun to talk to. But just like you'd expect, the further I got from the main route, the fewer people I saw. Eventually, there was no one. Early that afternoon, about 3 miles from the waterfall, something started to feel wrong. It was unnaturally quiet. There was no birds, no insects, not even the sound of wind moving through the trees, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I told myself I was just overthinking things and kept walking. When I finally reached the waterfall, it honestly wasn't that impressive, but it did have a decent swimming area, and after hiking for hours, the cold water felt incredible. So I stripped down to my boxers and took a quick swim. While getting dressed afterward, I started casually whistling to myself. The tune stuck in my head was Chill Bill. That's when I heard something whistle the same exact tune back. At first I assumed it was some kind of bird mimicking the sound, so I whistled the tune again. It whistled it back. We went back and forth a few times, and I actually thought it was pretty funny. Eventually I started setting up a camp nearby. But the strange feeling returned. Every so often I'd get goosebumps for no reason, like something was watching me from somewhere in the trees. As night started to fall, I built a small fire and used my jet boil to make dinner. That's when I realized something again. The silence had returned, not a single sound, just this heavy, uncomfortable quiet that felt almost unnatural. Something in the back of my mind kept telling me I wasn't safe there, but I ignored it. After eating, I crawled into my tent with a flashlight and a book. Eventually I fell asleep. Nothing happened during the night, at least not that I noticed. But when I woke up the next morning, my campsite had been completely trashed. My camp stool was gone. My bear bag had been cut down from the tree, and all the food inside were scattered across the ground. At first I assumed some clever animal had chewed through the rope, but when I picked it up I realized something. The rope hadn't been chewed. It had been cut cleanly, like it had been sliced with a knife. And the strangest part, none of the food had even been touched. Then I noticed something else. Bare footprints, all around my campsite. Keep in mind, I was at least 6 to 8 miles from the nearest road. As I stood there trying to process what I was looking at, I heard a branch snap somewhere in the distance. I instantly turned towards the sound. I couldn't see anything, but then I heard the whistling again. The same tune from the day before, only now it sounded different. The sound made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. That's when I finally decided to listen to my instincts. I needed to get out of there, fast. I started packing up my gear as quickly as I could, but the whistling kept getting closer. By the time I was stuffing my tent back into the pack, it sounded like the whistling was coming from multiple directions. I snapped. I stood up and yelled into the woods, "Shut up, what the hell do you want?" The whistling stopped immediately. For a moment, everything went silent again. Then, something in the woods repeated my words back to me, in my own voice, but it sounded distorted, like my voice coming from an old, broken television. The moment I heard that, I threw my pack over my shoulders and started running back the way I came. Behind me, I could hear something moving through the forest, fast. It kept switching between my whistle and my voice. It felt like it was playing with me, never getting too close, but never falling too far behind. Eventually, the sound started fading. It got quieter, then it stopped completely. I slowed down and finally stopped running. Against my better judgment, I turned around. I wish I hadn't. Because from somewhere right next to me, I heard the most horrifying screech I've ever heard in my life. I took off running again without even thinking. I didn't look back once. After less than half a mile, I ran into a couple who were backpacking along the trail. They looked startled and asked if I was the one who had just screamed. I told them everything that had happened. After hearing my story, they decided not to go anywhere near that area. All three of us quickly moved back towards a more populated part of the trail. As soon as I got to my car, I drove straight to a ranger station and reported what happened. Unfortunately, since the area where my campsite had been was technically outside park property, they said it wasn't within their jurisdiction. But they told me they'd still send someone out to investigate. The ranger station's parking lot was right next to the tree line, and just as I was getting into my Jeep, I heard it again. That same Chill Bill tune, whistling, coming from the woods directly in front of me. I have never driven away from somewhere faster in my life. Later that night, when I told my roommate everything that had happened, he just stared at me for a moment and said, "Bro, I'm never going camping with you." And honestly, I don't blame him. My brother thought he saw a ghost when he was a kid, but 20 years later, I realized what he had actually seen, and the truth was far more disturbing. This happened when I was about 7 years old, and my older brother was 10. It was a summer night, well past our bedtime. Our mom had fallen asleep on a couch downstairs, while my brother and I stayed up in our rooms playing Call of Duty. Eventually, we heard footsteps coming up the stairs. Our mom had woken up and was heading upstairs to make sure we were actually going to bed. Our dad worked construction and was often out of town for weeks at a time, so a lot of nights it was just the three of us in the house. To understand what happened, you need to picture the layout of the house. At the top of the staircase, if you turned right, you'd enter my parents' bedroom. If you turned left, you'd step into a long hallway. Halfway down the hallway on the left side was my brother's room. At the very end of the hallway was my room, directly across from the upstairs bathroom. There were also two glass doors at the opposite ends of the hallway that were almost never used. The one closest to my room opened onto a small balcony overlooking the front yard. The other door, near my brother's room, opened onto a back porch. The house had been built into a hill, which is why those doors existed in the first place. Normally they stay locked, and at night those dark glass windows always made the hallway feel a little unsettling. Both my brother and my mom had a habit of waking up during the night to use the bathroom. I only knew this because I was an incredibly light sleeper. Anytime the toilet flushed, I would wake up. But that particular night, something strange happened. After my mom went upstairs and told us to go to bed, my brother walked down the hallway towards his room. Then suddenly, his footsteps stopped. I remember lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening. A few seconds later, I heard him slowly walking back towards the bathroom and towards my mom's room. From where I was, I could faintly hear them talking. My brother sounded nervous. "I'm gonna try to use the bathroom before I go to bed," he said. Then he said something that immediately made my stomach tighten. "The past few nights I've been too scared to walk down the hallway." My mom asked him why, and my brother answered in the calmest voice imaginable. "I keep seeing a man wearing stripes at the end of the hallway." Just hearing that sent chills through my body. I remember laying there, staring at the darkness in my room, imagining someone standing at the far end of the hallway, just outside those glass doors. But my mom barely reacted. I don't know if she was half asleep or if she assumed my brother was trying to scare me with some ghost story. Either way, she brushed it off. The conversation ended quickly and everyone went to bed. But I didn't sleep well that night. After that, every time I went upstairs, I would run from the staircase straight into my room. I avoided looking down the hallway whenever possible, especially towards those glass doors. The next day, nobody mentioned it again. Life just moved on, years passed. Eventually I moved out. And the story faded into one of those weird childhood memories that never quite made sense. Then about 10 years later, when I was around 18, my mom and I were driving somewhere together. We started talking about a dog we had when I was younger. His name was Max. We were laughing about how he used to destroy my shoes and chew through anything he can find. Then my mom suddenly said something that caught me completely off guard. "Do you remember that time I opened the front door for the police and Max ran into the kitchen and tore open that giant bag of dog food?" I looked at her confused. In all the years I lived in this house, I couldn't remember the police ever coming over. We lived in a quiet rural area and my family owned guns for protection. Calling the police just wasn't something we ever did, so I asked her what she was talking about. She immediately looked surprised, almost like she had just said something she didn't mean to. Then she sighed. "Oh, that's right," she said. "I never told you about that." Apparently she had kept the story from me because I was too young at the time. Then she explained what happened. One night years earlier, she woke up because she heard noises outside her bedroom window. At first she thought it must have been an animal, but when she looked out the window, there was a man standing there, just staring into the house. The moment she turned on the bedroom light, the man took off running. She grabbed my dad's pistol and immediately called the police. When the officers arrived, she gave them the best description she could. Tall white male, short dark hair, wearing a striped shirt and jeans. The police didn't even hesitate. They told her that description matched the man they were already searching for. Apparently a prisoner had escaped from a nearby jail earlier that week. He had been in custody for a murder charge, and he had been seen wandering through the rural areas nearby. Now, when you hear those two stories together, the connection seems obvious. But for some reason, I didn't put it together at the time. It wasn't until years later, when I was in my mid-20s, that the realization hit me. My brother never saw a ghost standing at the end of the hallway. What he saw was a man, a real man, an escaped murderer. And for several nights in a row, that man had been standing outside our house, looking through the glass doors, just watching us.